Hello and welcome to the Crypto Morning News. I'm your host, Taylor. Let's get into it. Could be seeing another green candle close for Bitcoin today. Sentiment outlook, bulls get the green light. Will they capitalize on the positive momentum? That is the question of the day. Bitcoin fear and greed ticks up out towards fear, out of extreme fear, but still not 28 out of 100. Fed rate now 59%. I'm sorry, 95% likely to cut 25 basis points for the Federal Reserve. Major focus US ADP payroll unexpectedly fell by 32,000. It was expected to add 10,000. That is just continuing to kind of reinforce what the poly market spread has already been saying. Looking at the live spread, it's 94% likely that we will get a cut in December from the Federal Reserve on the 10th. Okay, so this jobs number just kind of resonates with that sentiment. Japanese 30-year bonds hit a historic 3.43 as the Bank of Japan weighs rate hikes days after rolling out a 135 billion stimulus package. So they are considering hiking rates, and the bond market is kind of pricing in that the Bank of Japan is going to hike rates at the same time that they're rolling out a pretty significant stimulus package. So this is contradictory, according to classical Keynesian monetary theory. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I'm just going to be honest with you. I've done a lot of research, tried to understand what's going on here. It is very unclear what happens next with the Bank of Japan and the Japanese economy. We talk about the carry trade, we talk about the yen, versus the Japanese bonds. I don't know what's going to happen here. It's very confusing. So I don't want to try to spend too much time on that, but it's something that I'm continuing to closely monitor because I know enough to understand that things could go south with this, and you want to understand if that's going to remain contained to the island of Japan, which is, probably unlikely that it remains completely contained and that their currency just gets demolished, or if that the fallout of what they're doing here, of what they're trying to prevent, gets outside of the island and goes to China, the United States, Europe, the UK, Australia, South America, so on and so forth. So we did not enough information yet to know exactly what's going to happen there. My prediction, though, is that gold is going to continue to be a favorable place to be as that global macro uncertainty continues. This is one to pay attention to, folks. I'm not going to be the one to fully explain it because I'm not going to claim that I understand the Japanese bond market and its monetary policy better than the next guy. But this is worrying, but we're also in the season of worry. So maybe it's just par for the course. Saylor is pushing to keep strategy in the MSCI index per Reuters. Chainlink ETF did 37 million inflows on the first day. So that's very encouraging. Saylor actively pushing to stay in MSCI is a little bit more concerning. The fact that he's having to go actually push buttons and do things and exert effort in that direction signals that there is some chance that MicroStrategy is taken out of the MSCI. I think if MicroStrategy was taken out of the MSCI, it would create volatility, but that would not change the long-term picture for either MicroStrategy or Bitcoin. MicroStrategy as a company, I should say. The stock MicroStrategy, I think because of what they did this week, where they sold MicroStrategy stock not to buy Bitcoin, but to just buy cash, is a little bit different, right? And so that's a change of behavior. So maybe the investor's behavior as a reaction is going to be different, is going to change. Again, I think MicroStrategy as a company is built to last, but the stock may not be the best for holders. MSTR. Moving along here, bullish vibes. Brian Armstrong and Larry Fink are appearing together in a joint on-stage interview hosted by Andrew Ross Sorkin. Interview will be published later is what we were looking for there. Options tied to the Bitcoin ETF IBIT have become the 9th largest in the U.S. market with over 7.7 million contracts open. So that's generally goodish, bullish. I want to go back to this Brian Armstrong, Larry Fink, and the timing of this. So they're speaking at some, I don't, it's Open Book Summit, something like this in New York. The important part of this, I think, is the timing, right? And this will take me over to the charts. So this is the 4-hour. Let me go out to the weekly. Yeah, the market, the crypto markets have done the correction. I think that's kind of what is being implied here. Now, something could go wrong. Something could go wrong, and I think we could go lower. But this correction is basically resonating with the entirety of this bull run since 2023. I'm not a rocket scientist when it comes to TA, but if you look at just do some simple percentage analysis of how much the pullbacks were peak to trough, you get 32% here for this pullback. Again, going all the way to the highs of this move down to the lows, 33%, right? Give or take. And then this move here, this was 31%. And now we are rocking out at a 36%, right? So we've oversold what we've seen in terms of pullbacks for this market. So you kind of have to ask the question, was Vanguard tactical in when they introduced their clients to this thing that has just pulled back a lot, Bitcoin and crypto? Were they tactical in doing that? And then the reason that I'm bringing all this up is because we go back to this headline that Brian Armstrong and Larry Fink, people who control a lot in the crypto world, they are now going to be meeting in front of presumably the most influential people in Wall Street. They wouldn't be getting on a stage together, and Larry Fink wouldn't be taking on the additional brand risk of sitting on stage with a crazy crypto guy if he didn't think it was going to pay off. So I think the timing here kind of says a lot that the bottom is in. Again, if you think that me saying the bottom is in means the bottom's in, then you're not thinking about the markets correctly. My claiming that the bottom's in is me, right? That's my opinion, but that doesn't mean that it is. And I can just as easily express the opinion that we could go lower, right? And I could tell a story why we would go lower, and it has a lot to do with Japanese bonds. Okay. So, but in the, just zooming in on this specific event, this is pretty bullish, and it's in the bullish vibes, right? I don't think this is going to be market moving necessarily. They're going to be speaking on tokenization. But here's something that someone told me, an elected official in Florida. I met with them as a young person, and they said something to me about specifically a nonprofit that I was working at, and it was the nonprofit was struggling. We were having trouble getting it off the ground. And what that elected official said was, sometimes the solution isn't to work harder at what you're doing today in order to get the results you want in the future, especially when you're trying to get a bunch of people on board with what you're doing. Sometimes the solution is to make the vision of what you're doing different and bigger, right? And so I think that's kind of what the move is here, is they're not working harder. They're working smarter. They're not going out pounding the pavement saying, go buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the best thing ever. What they're doing is telling the next chapter. They're saying, hey, by the way, if you don't have Bitcoin and you don't have Ethereum, you're kind of dumb as bricks, because we're over that now. That's a foregone conclusion. If you don't have it, you're dumb as bricks. The next big thing is tokenization, and that's what you need to be studying and getting involved in. If you're still studying Bitcoin and Ethereum and you're not convinced, you're behind the 8 ball. Right? The next thing is coming and you're going to miss it. If you've already missed this train, you're going to miss this train. So you make the vision bigger. And I think that that's kind of what this is about. And I think that the timing of this is very interesting. Now, keep in mind, I don't think this is going to be published live. It's probably going to be an edited version that's released, because people have paid a lot of money to be at the summit. They don't want to find out that they could have just stayed at home and watched this on their easy chair. So this will be published later today, is what Brian Armstrong said. Might be published later this weekend, but we'll get our hands on it eventually. It kind of doesn't matter what they say. They're just going to sit there and cheerlead tokenization and probably say Bitcoin is the new gold. And again, when Larry Fink speaks, we haven't heard much from him in a while. He had something yesterday. I can't remember what it was, but this will be an important one. Okay, UK passes law officially recognizing crypto as property. Um, this is good. This happened in the courts in the UK, I believe. I don't know that this happened in the legislature, in the what's it called, Parliament, right? So that doesn't mean that it's any less worth. But it wasn't an intentional legislation that was passed. Now, I could be wrong. That could have passed it through the legislature, but that's the important distinction that I would be looking for. This one didn't jump out to me as ultra significant. This is just kind of logical at this point and probably kind of taking the cues from what Taiwan and Singapore and Hong Kong and the United States have done. And I think what the EU has done as well. So little bit par for the course there. Next one, not par for the course. Actually, very interesting, kind of a sexy, interesting thought here. Binance has introduced Binance Junior, a parent-controlled crypto savings account for kids and teens. Now, think about the timing of this one, right? What's kind of buzzing in the news right now is the Trump accounts for American citizens, okay? So Binance coming out and saying, hey, we're going to do the same thing for our global citizens, right? That's a little bit, I think, of a peering behind the curtain of what we can expect going forward into the future. There's an analyst. I guess he's not really an analyst. He's an innovator. He's the former CTO of Coinbase. Actually, I think he was a CFO of Coinbase early on with Brian Armstrong. His name's Balaji Srinivasan, and he kind of has this theory that the way that the world is going is essentially there's three parties, there's three groups that are controlling and really have any kind of power and authority, and that's China and basically the internet / the West, right? So you have China and the internet / the West. The internet can kind of include Silicon Valley, and also the US government is in there somewhere, as well as a very significant military power, but a waning financial power in terms of its sovereign debt. So I think that's an interesting way to view things. This is the morning news. I'm waxing a little bit futurism, so I will regress and continue to move forward here. We do have some comments, but overall, that is an interesting one, right? Binance doing the parent-controlled crypto savings account for kids and teens. They kind of are letting the Trump administration do all the hard work on how to set that up, and then they're just going to copy and paste that for Binance, for global citizens. That's a really, really interesting non-state solution, non-government solution for global poverty, right? Global financial service deprivation. That's a very, very cool thing, very innovative, and it's very Balaji. If you study the work that Balaji's done, the network school and the network state, different things like that. Midterm news: Republicans win Tennessee. This is not a huge story in terms of the national kind of midterms, but this is a little bit of a taste. It's a data point, right, of what we could potentially see in the midterms later in 2026. Guys, the midterms is not something you want to sleep on and just ignore. That's going to be a very big part of the market puzzle going forward. Looking ahead, December 4th, we have jobless claims. The BLS is firing at all cylinders, doing an excellent job bringing us high-quality data from their bureaucratic system. December 5th, PCE, 11 a.m. The expectation is 2.8. The previous was 2.7. And then December 10th, FOMC decision. We will be going live presumably around 1:50 as we usually do. And Tim and I will break it down before that decision is released. Supreme Court ruling on tariffs, I think, is still to come. Don't know when that will come. And Asia closed mixed. The Nike was up 1.1%. And I think that's probably where we need to go back to, is the Japanese story, because this is the one that is very confusing, and I want to try to give as much of my brain cells on it as possible. So currently, 88% chance of a rate increase. For those of you who are just tuning in, Polymarket is a betting website, so this is not official data, right? But Polymarket got the U.S. 2024 U.S. election 100% accurate, state by state. All of the states were correct. So, and Polymarket has predicted correctly a lot of other major global events, okay? So Polymarket, not truth, but it's approaching truth. Okay, interesting. This is Japan, December uh, rate decision, not the US rate decision, that they would hike. Now, I think one way out of this, and I think it's a very real possibility, and that's why it's being priced in 10%. One possibility that the yen carry trade doesn't get unwound, right? And we have phases of global uncertainty and liquidity uncertainty in a time where global liquidity is already somewhat thin because of the U.S. government shutdown and some other and the we're just now ending QT in the U.S., which is by far the biggest central bank that matters the most for liquidity. Um, they could just not cut. I mean, they could just not hike. The Bank of Japan could just not hike, and that is actually what they did last time. They did one hike, and then they were going to do another hike, and they didn't do the second hike, right, of their federal funds rate. So that is one way out of this is to just continue to keep rates low. That would kick the can down the road, but kicking the can down the road seems to be the global default solution to all problems. So I don't put it past the central bank to just go ahead and not hike, even though the poly market spread is saying they're going to hike. That is one way out of this. Okay, but it's 88% likely that they are going to hike. So what do we do with that information? And I think the answer is gold. And I would like to say that the answer is Bitcoin. I think the answer will be a little bit Bitcoin, especially kind of looking at where Bitcoin is positioned here. But the answer, I think, is just going to be probably gold and silver and precious metals, maybe even commodities, right? This is going to be a safe haven for money that is uncertain about U.S. stock market, certainly the Japanese stock market, certainly the Chinese stock market. If you go and you look at the indexes globally, you can see that the Chinese stock. I'm on the weekly chart here. The Chinese stock market is not necessarily in a position where it's surging higher, right? It's having a bit of a pullback, a bit of a correction, kind of like the S&P 500. We can take a look at that. The S&P 500 having a little bit of a stalling, but after last week's green candle, it's kind of surged back to life. Could be making a run for a new all-time high for the S&P 500. The Dow Jones, the Qs, the Nasdaq looks pretty similar. And so as we kind of look through where money would rotate into, you have to ask the question, where is it going to go? And I don't know, but it's the kind of money that wants to be safe but also grow, right? So taking that into consideration, there's a lot of options there. As a crypto investor, obviously, I want to paint a picture where that rotates into Bitcoin, right? But we shall see. We shall see. But that is something that I'm definitely monitoring. The Japanese carry trade unwind, in my mind, is one of the most important things going on right now, because if they don't get that right, that could trigger some yucky things, some dangerous things, right? Meaning that so just for example, where do you turn when you have, if you're Japan's economy, you have stagflation, right? Meaning you have inflation and your unemployment rate is not doing well, right? And so their solution, which I don't understand the math for this, but I'm also not a central banker, their solution is to stimulate, right? And it's not printing necessarily, but it's to stimulate a significant amount, but also hike rates. That is not done. That is, you don't do QE and hike rates at the same time. That doesn't make any sense. However, that's what it looks like they're going to do. Now, there's also a chance that just works. Somehow that just works. And there's maybe it doesn't work in practice. And there is someone who, there's a bankruptcy or two of a significant size in Japan or offshore. But perhaps that is the cure that needs to go in, and a head will roll, but overall there will be only minor ripples in the global market. Perhaps that is an outcome, right? Perhaps that is an outcome. I think that's very optimistic, though. I think what's more likely to happen is that if you keep going down this road, Japan, and they do end up hiking rates, what is that? I think that you then have to start looking towards the ECB and the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England, who have their own problems domestically, and you're kind of asking for help, buy my bonds, please. Buy the Japanese bonds. And also if you could, help out our economy, maybe some couple billions gets flown in, right? Is that going to happen? Is the Federal Reserve going to say yes? Is the ECB going to? That's what a lot of bankers, that's what a lot of big smart money is trying to get their head around right now. They have their models. They're trying to figure all that out. I'm here to tell you the simple trade for this is just gold and silver. And again, I think if we were having this conversation, which we probably will, if we were having this conversation in 10 years, the answer would probably just be default Bitcoin. But because Bitcoin is kind of seen more by global risk participants, risk takers, as more correlated to the NASDAQ, it's technology, right? The way that investors see Bitcoin, they don't see it as that safe haven like gold globally. Now, people who understand Bitcoin obviously see it as a safe haven over the long term, but in the short and midterm, it trades too much with the NASDAQ to be seen as that safe haven. So maybe one way out of this, or one outcome, is that Bitcoin flips. It has flipped in the past. It has played the role of the safe haven in the past. Maybe this time it does that, right? When things really get rough, maybe Bitcoin, which is technology, that technology part, the solution to a problem part, gets turned on in the minds of investors, and we see upside. Got some comments here. I don't know that there's a ton more. Yeah, there's not. I've covered most of the news here for the day. Right. Let's go ahead and do a little bit more of an analysis here of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin on the weekly, it just closed a nice big weekly candle, and it stayed above what percentage drawdown? 32%, right? So it stayed very nicely in this box that I have drawn, which tells me that it's just doing what it's done before in this bull run. It's pulling back a little more than 30%, right? This time it pulled back quite a bit more, pulled down 36, but it's close. So is it close enough for investors to come in and take a risk? That's the question. And the answer today and last week is yes. Yes, it is enough to come in and take risk. That is enough of a pullback. That is enough of a discount for investors to come in and take risk. Okay, the question is can we continue to see the answer be yes? And as long as the answer continues to be yes, that strengthens the argument for going back to all-time highs or going back to major resistances in between where we are now and all-time highs. So my concept here is that it's actually looking pretty good. And that's why it's my opinion, it's not the truth. It's not a fact. It is my opinion that we have probably seen the bottom here, right? It is more likely than not, in my opinion, that we've seen the bottom here for Bitcoin. Can we go lower? I'm here to tell you, we can definitely go lower. It is, especially with the Bank of Japan situation being very uncertain. That is a great way to just sum it up. It is uncertain. If you watch a bunch of crypto YouTube channels and you listen to a lot of crypto influencers, I probably have a little bit more of an edge of understanding global bond markets than the average person that you're listening to if you're just watching crypto media. This stuff that's going on with Japan, again, I've painted a couple of pictures where it could go okay. They could just not hike the rates. That would probably be good for global markets, for uncertainty. It would reduce uncertainty. Or the fix that they put in, hiking rates, but also doing QE, maybe that just works, right? After all, these people have studied economics all their lives. It doesn't make sense to me, but I'm just somebody sitting in an office in Florida, right? I don't know as much as central bankers working at the Japanese central bank. But until we get a solution, uncertainty is the name of that game, right? And so people are trying to figure out what is going to happen. So I think that's probably one of the more important things to go on, and that if it does not go well, could be what sends us back down, maybe to 75, maybe to 62. Who knows, right? Have a feeling folks are going to want to look at some altcoins. By the way, I know I've talked a lot about the bond markets today. I don't usually have to do that, but today that is kind of the big story, right? There's this big, scary thing that's going on that matters at a time where a very fragile crypto market and a somewhat fragile AI equities narrative are trying to continue to win the new marginal investor, people just getting paid, smart people, smart money just getting paid, saying, why wouldn't I just hold dollars and wait for this uncertainty to play out, wait for some of this stuff to flush out, and hey, maybe I'll just wait till January, maybe I'll just wait till the end of the year to clear out. The market is trying to say, no, 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 don't hold those dollars, put it in Bitcoin, put it in Microsoft, put it in AMD, put it in Nvidia, right? In the higher we go, the question is the next marginal investor just going to keep saying, yes, okay, I'll keep buying, and as long as that keeps happening, then we get these higher highs and lower high and higher lows. So we'll see. We'll have to see. But I want to get to these questions. We're actually somehow ahead of time. Looking at Bitcoin more zoomed in on the daily chart here, there's a couple of things that I was noticing this morning. One, that again, if you're trading Bitcoin, this is going to be pretty low level analysis. This is going to be kind of obvious, but you've got a higher low here, right? And that's what you want. You want to see a higher low. And in addition, as of this candle here, you've also got a higher high, right? So what does that mean? That means that in the extremes of this range, ooh, that is a terribly drawn line, but you kind of get the point. I'll redraw it. I won't be lazy. In this range, in the extremes of this range, the bulls are having a more favorable outcome than the bears, right? So, what goes up must come down. But when it comes down, it's actually getting bought more aggressively than back here, okay? Just fundamental analysis here. Very, very simple. Fundamental technical analysis, I should say. That's a contradiction, right? And then when the bulls are pushing and they've had success and we've seen movements higher, they're able to convince more buyers to come in. More buyers are coming in than before and pushing that wick even higher. Now, getting a candle close higher than this candle is not something that's really apparent that we've done yet. It may be, if you really zoom in, it may be that this candle printed higher than this one. But the idea is that if we can get a significantly higher candle to print here, that is going to be very bullish, right? Because that is a candle close higher, not just a wick higher. Wicks are okay, but they're not candles. Candle closes above the previous local high, muy bueno, right? Very good. That's what we really want to see as people who are long an asset. All right, let's see what the comments are all about. Let's see what the chatter is all about. We'll go to the top here. Moho said GM. Ken Monster, what's up, Ken? Said, what up, T? What up? I'm doing good. Got my coffee here. Tony Rosas said, good morning, sir. How are you? I'm doing good. I hope you're doing well as well, Tony. Juby said, thoughts on Tau halving? I don't have a lot of thoughts. We can look at the Tau chart. Tau has a lot of intentional similarities to Bitcoin. I don't know if the Tau halving, I don't know much about it, right? But the fact that there is one is good. It's encouraging. But what I am noticing here on the daily is the contrast to Bitcoin, right? Is that Tau is actually still seeing lower highs. I'm sorry, let me go back to it. I think it is lower highs though. Yeah. So Tau is just in a different positioning, right? Seeing lower lows, and it hasn't really done a high yet, but lower highs, right? Whereas Bitcoin, if this was Bitcoin, it has already caught up and it actually put in a lower high, right, relative to this. So Tau is looking less bullish than Bitcoin, but it's an altcoin, right? And so you want to compare it to altcoins. Let's compare this to Ethereum. So Ethereum, no, looks better, looks more like Bitcoin. Compared to Solana, it's a little bit more like Solana, but it's not even beating Solana. Okay, so I wasn't sharing my screen. That's unfortunate. So yeah, but you heard my words there. I think Tau is a great project. I think if any altcoins are going to do well, I think Tau is going to be in the cluster of altcoins that are going to do quite well. All right, let's keep making our way down here. Wispy dropped the shroom emoji. Love to see it. Moho said, I've not seen anything about this UK stuff. Probably means they can tax it more now. Yeah. I think crypto being property in the UK is like, it's a little bit of a mid headline. Like it's not bearish, but it's also not it's not like crazy. Maybe it is though. Maybe I'm wrong. I need to probably look into that more. So Juby says that the halving is in December 5th. Okay, well that's good. That's good for it's good for Tau. I have Tau, not selling it. Warrior said, "Hey Shroom, I'm about 15 minutes behind on 2x speed, but what are your thoughts of Trump basically confirming Kevin Hassett being the next Fed chair during the Trump account announcement yesterday? Not sure if you covered it, but would like your thoughts on it. Notice, okay. So thoughts on Kevin Hassett. First of all, the way having watched Donald Trump very closely, like many people have for a long time, the way he communicated about Kevin Hassett seems to me like Kevin Hassett is the guy. He's going to be the new chairman of the Federal Reserve. I think that's really good, right? He was an advisor for Coinbase, so you have to realize that Coinbase's interests are for people to participate in crypto. Coinbase interests long term are that crypto's prices are higher than they are in the 2023 bear market. But Coinbase's interests are not that prices just go up, right? Coinbase is kind of like living in between the crypto world and the institutional world. It, in a lot of ways, is the bridge between these, as it's a major custody provider, custody service provider, meaning it holds a lot of Bitcoin for a lot of these ETFs and institutions. So Kevin Hassett, is the name of the game, and is the name of this topic, and I've just talked mostly about Coinbase. So that kind of tells you what I think about Kevin Hassett. Now, when it comes to what Donald Trump wants to do, he's going to now have Kevin Hassett, and Stephen Mirren is already on the board of the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee that determines the federal funds rate, that votes on that. So these two gentlemen are going to be bringing a much different tone to the Federal Reserve, and Jerome Powell won't be there. I think he'll still be in rotation, but I don't think he's going to be a voting member once he is brought down from the chair position. So Jerome Powell will still be there. I don't think he has to resign from his position, but he just won't be the chair anymore. I don't know what. It's actually a good question. Maybe he just resigns and walks away because the writing's on the wall for him, but I'm not really sure. Overall, the Fed is changing. Kevin Hassett is going to be the new leadership of that. And to the extent that I understand what his priorities are, I think he is mostly focused on probably bringing down those rates, making housing more affordable for young people, and paying down the debt. Right, that's kind of the new meta that's the new priority list for the Federal Reserve, who has these other priorities, which is keeping inflation low and keeping unemployment at a target rate. And so, I think what the new regime that's coming in, that's Stephen Mirren and Kevin Hassett, and to some extent Fed Waller as well, seems to have been played along quite well with this new regime, this new ideology of what the Fed should be. They're going to be probably operating with a different set of priorities, which is a big change. It's a big change. But Kevin Hassett as a person, I don't know much about. He has ties to Coinbase. I don't think he's just going to get in there and do the bidding of Coinbase. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is that he generally is aligned with the future of finance way of thinking, that the old way of thinking, which maybe is just Keynesian economics in general, is not good, and we need to strive for something else. And to the extent that the Trump administration has a plan for Bitcoin to be a central bank held asset, I think that there's something there to consider. That maybe it's going to be Kevin that really does that and doesn't screw it up. DH85 Rocks said, notice that every time crypto goes back up, the negative trolls retreat back to their parents' basement. Yep. Troll's gonna troll. until they can't troll because the price is smacking them in the face. Wesley 388 said thoughts on Sui. It pumped 20% yesterday. It was one of the best performers. Yeah, I mean Sui's a strong crypto project. It's the other thing to consider too is that it's in its first cycle. So if you go back to Sui, look at Sui's chart. I'm going to just immediately go out to the, well, I'm gonna look at it here. So I think one of the reasons why it surged, two things. It was a really hot crypto last year. So let me go ahead and go out to the weekly because that's where I thrive. That's where I like to look. Oh, interesting too. I want to point that out as well. So Sui has gotten down below this significant line of support, right? So it's kind of trending. That's not good. There, I'll remember to share my screen this time. There you go. So Sui has shown, first of all, it has a little green delta here on the neurowave. That's really good from flow signals. But the other thing too here is that you are starting to see the curling, and I'm paying more attention to this. I don't have a firm thesis on this quite yet, but if you look around at the weekly MACDs of a lot of cryptos, you are starting to see some curling. The one that's the most defined, I believe, was Aave that I was looking at. But just while I'm here on Sui, I mean, this looks bullish, right? This looks good. You're finding a bottom here. You're well below the zero line, and you are seeing curling here for the MACD lines. And this is going to be something that may be brought to your attention for the first time. If you really look at these MACD, if you look at the MACD here, what do you notice, right? This is the weekly MACD that is decelerating histograms, meaning the bearish momentum is slowing, right? Now, that doesn't mean that price can't go lower, but what it means is that the rate at which we are declining has decreased. Now, that's obvious because price is going up now, but when you get green candles consistently, that changes the way that is more appealing to smarter and smarter investors, right? Because very dumb investors are going to try to time the bottom exactly with their investment. I'm talking about investments here, not trading necessarily. Maybe swing trading a little bit. But dumb traders are going to try to time the bottom. They're going to try to catch the falling knife. And I'm not talking about DCAing. DCAing is a different thing. If you just have 10 grand total in your whole investment portfolio, a dumb trader is just going to try to buy the bottom here, thinking that that's the bottom, and then it goes lower, right? A smart trader is going to wait for shifts in momentum. I'm sorry, I'm using all the wrong words here. A smart investor is going to wait for a shift in momentum, and that's exactly what we're seeing here on the MACD, and also the neurowave is also printing this as well. Now, this curling is much more defined. It's already pointing back up, and you do have a slowing, a deceleration here of this cloud here. So I wanted to show you a different one that I think this is actually even more exaggerated on. Yes, is Aave. So Aave has slowed. It's had that initial curl, and it is actually starting to kind of flatten out here. There also you didn't have as much of a exaggerated kind of sell off there. Deceleration, histograms, curling. This is Aave, right? Uniswap. This one is interesting because it's been decelerating. Those histograms have been decelerating. Remember, this is the one that had a huge pop because they were talking about turning on the fee switch. But what you'll notice here that's a little different is that this MACD curling uncurled, right? So I think that Uniswap, there's a chance that Uniswap is a little bit ahead of the curve, but my hesitation to believe that is that it's a bit anomalistic because none of the other coins were able to announce a fee switch, which then triggered this huge wick to the upside there for Uniswap. Assuming folks were interested in Tau, we can look at Tau in this framing as well. So on the weekly candle, not the same, right? Probably has more downside because this MACD line has not started to curl at all. Let's look at the big boys, Bitcoin. On the MACD, on the weekly, I wouldn't quite call this a curling yet. It's a very gradual, obtuse curling here, but you are seeing the first signs of a decelerating histogram here. So if that can stay in and we can get a deceleration here to print, that would be very good. What would keep that from happening is if we probably filled this candle back to the downside, right? That would then bring this histogram lower, and it would spell that the bears still have control of the momentum. I believe we also got a green delta here as well, and that curling looks very good on the neuro wave too. So this looks pretty good to me. It's a little bit too early to call and say that it is a bottom, like definitively. My opinion is that it is a bottom. Ethereum is in an interesting spot too, because it never crossed below the zero line, or it's just doing that now while it also is decelerating. So this is playing a role in why Bitcoin dominance has actually slowed, or Bitcoin dominance has actually gone down, I believe. And I think that's because Bitcoin dominance, I mean, I'm looking at it on the weekly here. Bitcoin dominance has come down and it's caught up a little bit, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Ethereum, while it sold off, it hadn't really built up a ton of like huge movement to the upside in the same way that Bitcoin had. And so on its fallback, it's not as exaggerated. It's not as steep of a curve to the downside, whereas Bitcoin is already down below that zero line. So this you could also interpret this as Ethereum has more downside, but you could interpret it the way I just did, which is to say Ethereum's kind of shown strength and has given up less ground because it took less ground here. All right, I won't show gold. Yes, I will. Very quickly. Look at the contrast of that, right? Gold, very, very good. I mean, very bullish, right? It had a S&P 500. Interesting, different type of situation here, right? You have the curling of the MACD line and then coming down below, right? Very interesting. You do have the deceleration there. So trying to stay relevant, trying to stay exciting and engaging here. But I mean, ultimately, I'm just kind of showing you what the different MACD lines are looking like. Tesla, very interesting here, curling and then uncurling there for the MACD line. A lot of confusion here. As you can see, investors aren't really sure what they want to do, but you are getting on the weekly a bounce off that midline of the Bollinger Band, which is something that investors pay attention to. All right, I think I'm going to leave it there, folks. Caspa, one more. I'll do Caspa. And again, if you're newer to the community or you're just watching for free on YouTube, I am not the technical analyst. I know I've spent a lot of time on the charts today, but if you guys want much more honed in, lower time frame technical analysis, just join our group and go to the VIP trading channel, where you'll be able to see much more sophisticated TA. If you're thinking that what I'm showing you is sophisticated TA, you are mistaken. This is very zoomed out weekly TA, which is good, if you're just a long-term investor. It's actually quite sophisticated if you're a long-term investor. But if you're looking to trade crypto, I've showed you very little that would be helpful for you if you're trading it on a lower time frame, just so that you know that. Caspa, yeah. I mean, so this one is just so different, right? It crossed below the zero line last year, right? Early, like October of last year, and hasn't been able to get back up above it. What I will say though is that perhaps the regime of doom for Caspa here is coming to an end as those red histograms are waning, and we are potentially seeing a bull cross here for Caspa. But we got a bull cross here that led to a decent amount of upside in the momentum. But just to shed like basically half of it back. So Caspa, in terms of candlestick analysis, I mean, it doesn't look great because, I mean, you got a much lower low, and then you've just been consistently getting lower highs. I guess what you could say, though, is that this is a descending wedge, which these usually break to the upside. So, you could do some kind of a measured move here, and you'd probably end up with something like this, getting back up to 15 cents. Like, I have hope for Caspa, but I have hope for a lot of altcoins. I think Caspa will be in that cluster of altcoins that do pretty well once QE really starts coming in, and we get through a lot of this crazy yen carry trade, stuff that's kind of clogging things up. Um, but I do think that there will be cryptos that get left behind. And for me, I think Caspa is a little bit closer to that pack of coins that just don't maybe ever rebound, right? I don't know. Ever is probably too strong of a word, but Caspa is, let's see, in my level of conviction, I haven't sold it, so I have more conviction in it than Cardano, I suppose, and Compound. Um, but I also bought it very, very low. Like my cost basis for Caspa, I believe, is like 8 cents. So I'm actually quite. It might even be 6 cents. I can't remember, but I'm actually not hurting on it, right? Whereas a lot of people are really hurting on Caspa. But I got in and I didn't keep DCAing. I got in at like 4 cents and then 8 cents. I think that's why I'm at 6 cents cost basis on average. But the reason why I still have conviction in Caspa is not. It's not. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think it's the future of crypto. I think there is a strong argument to be made that Caspa is the best proof of work iteration on what Bitcoin has done. But if you look at the mining incentive and you look at kind of how miners who like bought mining equipment, how they were treated by the protocol, there was something there that was lacking. Whereas what Satoshi built, as you can see, lasted 16 years, and it's still very good to mine Bitcoin if you can afford to do it. Whereas with Caspa, it seemed like it became very unaffordable very quickly to mine Caspa. Whereas people were mining Bitcoin for years just on their gaming computers, right? With their little NVIDIA chips and stuff. Now it's different, but Bitcoin has had a much longer life cycle. So that's my thoughts on Caspa. I guess I haven't really thought about it or expressed my thoughts in a while. But if you look at the actual technology that Caspa is, I think it is the future of crypto. It's just you have to unfortunately have to ask the question is how easy could that be to copy and then do a better job of the actual mining distribution and make it to where anybody and everybody could mine it, right? That might be better. Or maybe not. I'm not sure. But I think that the fact that Caspa is proof of work and that it is still being mined is probably the best thing that it has going for it. I think the incremental speed increases and the smart contracts stuff, that's good because it's proof of work and it is unique in the space. I think that is definitely a pro for it. But I don't think that institutional investors are coming into the space. I don't think they're going to look at Solana and say, man, I need to keep looking. I don't think they're going to look at Ethereum and say, man, I need to keep looking. I need to find smart contracts that are also proof of work. And I think that's probably Caspa's biggest weakness is that as institutions come in, they're going to find Solana, they're going to find Ethereum, and then the smart guy that they pay a lot of money to analyze the technology is going to say, yeah, these are pretty good. And that's, that's going to happen, I think, probably 9 times out of 10 or 8 or 9 times out of 10. The other times it's probably just going to go to HBAR, right? Or the next best thing. The thing about HBAR is that it has a non-blockchain technology, kind of like how Caspa has the DAG, the hashtag. HBAR has something, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Hash graph. There it is. Haven't said that word in a long time. And so that looks pretty good. HBAR, also one of the first coins to be brought into the Vanguard world, right? You have Chainlink, HBAR, Solana, XRP, Ethereum, and obviously Bitcoin. Chainlink and HBAR are kind of like the risky plays, right? So obviously an institutional builder and an institutional investor won't be looking to Chainlink for blockchain technology necessarily, but they'll, do they need to go further down the risk curve than HBAR? And even if they've said no to Solana and Ethereum, right? Or maybe they've taken an allocation in Solana and Ethereum and started to build some of their product on those blockchains. I guess what I'm saying is I think it's too far down the risk curve. And I think institutions don't like to spend a lot of time developing on stuff where they don't have a no, Tim, you threw me off my train of thought. You said you texted me here. Okay. Looks like I need to be in a meeting. So I will end the live stream here. Folks, if you have had a good time in this live stream, go ahead and smash the like button, and we will go ahead and continue this tomorrow. So tune in 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we will have some fun. Adios.